Hello and welcome to the Purple Ray channel. Today we have Terry with us. Terry is the author of several books, as you know, and today we will discuss the analog conscious mind. I wonder what that is. I hand over to Terry. Maybe you can enlighten us.
Yes, I hope so. I spent 30 years working this out so far. First of all, I have covered some of this in a previous conversation we've had. Now, so first of all, there are two types of consciousness and two states of being. Well, there are more than two, really, but two that are particularly relevant to us. Now, on the subject of consciousness, there is all consciousness is based on the concept of numbers, because numbers are the building blocks or bricks of meaning that get assembled from very simple concepts like oneness, two-ness, three-ness, and so on, 1, 2, 3, up to infinity. And there are massive numbers way beyond anything we could imagine that will be explored by consciousness. So in fact, it's the prime numbers that serve as the basis for universal consciousness. There are two states of consciousness that go along with this model. There is it's all based on the idea of number, and number can have infinite meaning and infinite values. Now, the meaning I call numerological, because it is the qualitative, if you like, aspect of number. And on the other side of this, we've got the value, the numerical aspect of consciousness. Now, if you're wondering what all that has to do with it, the thing is, what we have really is two states of consciousness. One is about meaning and the other is about value or information. Now, at some time or other, we had a balance in these two states of consciousness. And the way I see it is that we had the left brain associates more with logic and information. The right brain is to do with art, pattern, meaning. And I think that the right brain was probably dominant at one time. And what's happened is something happened that more or less put us from right brain or a balance to the left brain. Also, we have had a much stronger spiritual dimension than we have now. We would have had that in what's called the crown chakra. The word chakra I don't really like because it's not English, and so I don't fully understand the concept of concepts expressed in another language. But I see it as a kind of processor, a quantum digital processor that relates these two states together. Now, at some stage or other, our physical being is split between two levels. Now, these levels are not literally one above the other. The levels are conceptual. In other words, it's about the meaning. We have what I call the analog wave dimension, and working with that, there is the quantum digital dimension. These two states are reflected in the material universe in the way of light, because if you take light as it's got a wave, how can light be a wave in one situation and behave like a particle in another? Well, the answer is that on the wave dimension, light is a wave, and on the quantum dimension, light is a particle called a photon. So it's possible to be in both those situations. We have an analog fractal body with waves that create the physical form by planting information, digital information, in what I call the quantum digital layer. Now, to simplify all that, we essentially are a pattern of information in the physical, quantum digital information, but we don't actually exist in this state. We are infinite being called the light or oneness, and we are experiencing all this. So if you like, the metaphor for this is that the game machines, people play with a game machine, they are separate from their, whatever it is they're using, their Xbox, their computer, or whatever. They're using, they have an avatar in the game, and their interaction is through a keyboard or one of these headsets with handheld things. So you're out of the game, but you're working it, and your consciousness, your mind, is focused in the game. So if that makes sense, we were beings of a higher conscious state, what I call the analog wave dimension, and we worked these bodies, which are called avatars in game terminology, and this allowed us to experience physicality and individuality, because when you're part of the oneness of the light, which is the state of love, you're everything. So if you want to understand yourself, you want to become an individual, you have to go into this separation. So we work this game machine in order to experience ourselves as a finite fraction of the total vast being that we really are. Now, the way this happened is that at some point in time, the game player on the analog dimension got so absorbed in the game on the physical dimension that their focus of their consciousness dropped into that state. And it's as though the person playing on a game machine believes they are the person in the game, their character in the game. They've forgotten that they're really outside the game, working it from a machine, and they've become the game. And the environment of the game is the physical universe that we see around us. But it's all just a virtual reality. It doesn't actually exist. And I think of it as a trap, that this descent, it has become something of a problem. And we are now, all games come to an end when they've achieved as much as they can. And if you think about, say you're training an airline pilot, you put them in a flight simulator, and they have to go through various training tests, and they give them situations to cope with, like an engine fire, or the landing wheels don't come up or don't go down, and how to navigate an airliner, land, put it away, so on. All these things require learning in an environment where you can't do any serious damage. That's the main thing, that the pilot can make all sorts of mistakes that they can't afford to make when they're actually in the air with real passengers in a real aircraft. And in a way, that's what we're in. We're a primitive form of embryonic consciousness. We're like children, and we're in this game machine, and we're practicing being sentient entities, but we're in an environment where we can't actually do any damage. This is the thing. We can appear to do damage. You know, we can do all sorts of things. We can let off nuclear weapons, and you know, this is rather upsetting to the people who organize the game. But we can't, because we're just spirit, and these bodies are really an illusion, a virtual reality. We can't seriously damage anything. You know, the whole experience is virtual. So what we do here is really, it's a classroom, it's a learning situation. We're in a school, and this is our education. But once we've graduated, we don't know where we'll be next, but we'll be in a state, presumably, where we will have responsibilities and a whole different way of life, where we need to have understanding and a sense of responsibility. Because, you know, I mean, just for example, the universe doesn't operate entirely without some sort of supervision and intervention. There are scientists and engineers in the state of consciousness that's behind this universe, that works it and drives it, and they have serious consequences if they make mistakes. I mean, you can't misplace a black hole or drop a galaxy from one place to another. Everything has to be managed, including our lives here. So we're in the training simulator, thinking that we're real and that we'll die one day, but well, we won't. We'll simply withdraw from the game, really. But anyway, so does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm just thinking, so if time doesn't really exist and we only experience it while we're in a body, you could say that location doesn't really exist. I mean, it's all everywhere. And I was just thinking, you know, so when we're specific and we're in a body, we are in a certain time and in a certain location, whereas the wave is kind of everywhere, because
Yes.
everything is connected and the wave ripples out. So the end is still the wave. Everything is the wave. And that was just one thought I had about this. And
well, that's a very interesting thought, and it's there's quite a lot of consequences just from that. You see, in the digital universe is binary. It's based on noughts and ones. One relates to time, which in this quantum digital dimension does have a clock, a chip, you know, like a computer. Any computer chip is built around a clock, and the higher the speed, the more processing it can do. Well, the speed of the clock that we're in this environment is the speed of light. That sets our clock speed. On the analog dimension, which is much closer to the spiritual state, it's timeless. There is no time. And we are in both these states at once. So now the zero relates to space and one relates to time. And so the space is made up of bubbles called the quantum foam. So there's no such thing as an empty space. Matter creates space, and the space around it fills up with these quantum bubbles. Now, that means that each one of us has a 0 point somewhere that marks our entry into space and time. It sets our personal coordinate system. So what that means is that everything in this physical universe that we see has its own 0 point and is at the center of its version of the universe. So you are at the center of your version of the universe, and you construct that in your infinite mind, in your infinite state, on the basis of sensory information that comes out of your, sight, touch, hearing, feeling, and so on. All of that translates into the infinite, and where you construct this experience and this whole universe, every part of the universe creates its version of the whole universe. Now, the significance is that let's take the James Webb Telescope, where this wonderful new machine in space that looks at infrared radiation, and they're looking out into the distance. They're trying to see back in time to before the or when the universe was created. They want to go as far back as they can to see when the universe, what the early form of the universe was. Well, the thing is that the Big Bang and any explanation, whether the world is on the back of a turtle climbing through the sky, being nudged by a goddess, or whether it's a Big Bang and the quantum physics model of it, is immaterial. It's all just a story to explain because the human state we're in now, our minds always have to furnish an explanation for everything. We have to have a reasonable story. So we think that the universe we're in is an empty box. We've got every matter is floating around in it. And if the matter wasn't here, the empty box would still be here. Well, it isn't. It isn't like that at all. So what it is that every object, the center of the universe is everywhere. Everything is the center of its own version. So if you had a spaceship and you went to travel from beyond the stars to distant stars, and then maybe to distant galaxies, you wouldn't get any nearer to the edge of the universe because you are the center. You cannot leave the center. So what would happen is that the whole space field model, the virtual reality, would simply fold around you. So nothing ever leaves the center of the universe. There is no periphery. There is no outside. There's no beginning. There's no past and no future. The whole thing is a constructed story that we've built up in consciousness. And none of it is real. It's all just an act of perception by infinite mind in the oneness of the light. And in order to experience it, we create this model. If you look at the Taijitu, the yin-yang symbol, you've got the white area, the oneness, the light, and you've got the dark area, the nothingness, the void. But that is really being asleep. So you've got active consciousness, passive consciousness, which, shadow or darkness. It simply means that the great light puts a part of itself in the shadow. You get a point of light in the darkness, and that is your personal light shining out in the state of being asleep. So we're dreaming this universe in the state of somnambulance, of being asleep. And we experience that small part of the light that is ours, and not the whole of it. You see, if you were in the oneness, in the totality of the light, you'd be so swamped by everything you couldn't function as an individual. But by falling asleep, entering the darkness in the shadow, dreaming yourself awake in this environment, which is just a mathematically structured game or dream, we can have this existence, and we can learn to be what we need to be in order to progress to the next stage of our evolution. So I like the idea that these people are got all this equipment trying to see the edge of a universe that doesn't exist.
Well, my question is, do we need to evolve at all, or is that even an illusion? Are we not already complete, being part of the whole?
In a sense, yes, we don't. There's nothing we must do or have to do. But I think that the thing about consciousness, of being an individual, you see, it's not easy. Being a human being is a difficult job. It's not an easy thing to do. And if you think about it, would you come from a highly evolved spiritual state is not a place where you can learn much. Now, what you do is you come into separation, into the darkness, but you have to go from primitive forms of existence to acquire experience by going from the lowest to the highest. We're not the highest by any means, but we're much more evolved, say, than a mouse or a slug or an atom. You know, we're on a stage of development, and I think the imperative to want to improve and evolve and learn came with us when we went into separation in the first place. Now, what happens is the oneness fragments into parts. Those parts experience individual existence, and it's an extremely long, long time is meaningless in when you're talking about eternity. It's always now, but the process is gradual. We cope with as much as we can, so we're evolving. So by going to sleep, what we want to achieve in the end is to awaken in the oneness, in a state of full awareness of everything, so that when we rejoin the oneness, the desire, we can't avoid the desire to return to the oneness. It's built into us, but we can forget that we've got that desire. And I think that's what happens. We've forgotten the desire to return to the oneness. In fact, it's got so silly that people are having their bodies cryogenically frozen so that they can have them return to life. It's like saying, I'm going to keep this old computer forever. Well, I mean, you know, things become obsolete, bodies become obsolete. Or we're going to have our consciousness uploaded into a mainframe computer where we're going to exist forever in a digital form. As a pattern, you know, in a computer. Well, all this is nonsense, because our true consciousness isn't even here. So why would you want to preserve something that doesn't really exist? So we're the process of time in the physical dimension is the awakening of a clock. The awakening of the mind. So each moment of time, we choose the events that we undergo in the spirit, in the physical dimension, the story that we're working through. We've chosen it to be something we can cope with. Because it's a gradual awakening. If we awaken too quickly, we wouldn't be able to cope. Now, that is, in fact, the situation that we are in as a collective. The human race is now in the state of gradually waking up or being awoken much faster than individually we can cope with. And this is why all of the systems we've created are trying to prevent that from happening, because they are elements of the game. I can explain that a bit more later, but so the desire to return to the oneness is something that we have no choice about, if that answers the question. And we do it in stages. We evolve by going from one form of existence, matter or something, or it might be an ocean, or you work your way to becoming a sentient being, and then a more sentient being on a higher dimension, or whatever. It's all steps and on a ladder.
Would it be fair to say that we've actually already made it? Because if there's no time, really, our future already exists somewhere, and we are just experience an evolution as an individual, whereas we've already made it.
Yes.
No, so
That's
that, I mean, we
perfectly
just
right. Yes.
want
Yes.
to have the experience of evolution, because in the total oneness of time and space, there is no evolution, basically. And I think it's a bit boring, you know. Sorry.
Well,
So
what you've said is right. We are infinite beings in the oneness. There's nothing greater than that. We're trying to remember who we are, really, but we're doing it in manageable chunks, in little episodes like this. This is a little episode in a day. Your life is an episode in a much bigger day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's how it works. Yes, we are. Yes, it's a process of remembering. Each moment of time you experience is really remembering something that's already happened.
And is it also fair to say that we are here to experience sleep or ignorance or limited awareness to a certain extent? You know, when we become the particle, the point, the individual, we artificially think we are separated from the whole to experience what that limitation means. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, completely.
Yeah.
Yes. The process has been that I don't know how or why or when we became focused in the game instead of using the game. So before we would have been on this wave dimension that I talk about. Individuals in that game, it took on a role in the game, these physical avatars. Now, what caused them to descend into the game directly, I don't know. You see, what we tend to do is that a lot of these processes, by our standards, are purely abstract and are beyond finite understanding. But what the human race does is it tends to take things like this and it makes them anthropomorphic. It turns them into ourselves. The forces of consciousness that move and create, we called gods. So we made them like human beings. And the creator of the universe, we've made into a male old man with a beard who, you know, the God of Bibles and so on is really something beyond our imagination. But by making it, by turning everything into a story, and myths are a particularly important version of the stories we've created. to explain things to our own satisfaction. So we, you know, if you go back to tribal cultures, they've all got these stories to explain everything that's happened. And we've got our own stories now in our sophisticated Western culture. We call it history, science, and technology. You know, these are all just stories. They're not any significant reality. And they've been hijacked by the game anyway for its own purposes. So we're in a situation where we have to decide whether to believe the evidence of our senses as we are here, and what we read, what we hear, what we watch, or whether to find that higher expression of spirituality within. Now, I can say from my own experience, I've always had an interest in science right from an early age, but I also grew up surrounded by psychics and mediums and healers, and people and I was having experiences that didn't fit with the science I was starting to read about in my early teens. And I always had this desire to try to relate one set of experiences in terms of the other. Now, that process accelerated in 1992 when a series of events put me into a higher state of consciousness, and I found that I could, like a shaman, I could get information that was coming to me from outside or inside, I don't know, but it was like getting a download or being given a whole idea, concept with lots of ramifications, all wrapped up in one hit, in one moment, and then I would have to spend a few days unraveling it, putting it into place. It happens a lot more quickly now. So what I'm doing is trying to get beyond what appears to be the reality here into a higher reality that doesn't lend itself to images or shapes or words or anything like that. It's purely abstract, and then taking those experiences and then translating them into metaphors and language and words. So I see myself as a writer, really, more than anything. But that's only, you know, I could be a cyclist. A cyclist, you know, you don't have a career as a cyclist. It's a way of getting from one place to another. So I'm not a writer because that's all I want to do. But I found it the best way of translating these feelings I get from this higher dimension and turning it into words. So every time I write something, I learn something new. Now it sounds silly. I don't look in books because there's no point. You know, that it would take me too long. But by writing, it's coming out. And the writings in recent years have all been about this, what I call this analog and digital split, this divide. Now, the important point is that while some of the people or beings who lived on that dimension descended into the physical world, there are others there who didn't, and they're still there. And what's been happening is this, since we let off the bombs in 47 or 48, whenever it was, I don't know which year we exploded the first atom bomb, but then we started to see all sorts of things happening, UFOs turning up, things like that, and beings coming from higher dimensions. Well, the Earth has this analog wave dimension, and there are beings who exist there, and these give rise to, in the past, to stories of elves, fairies, and monsters, and all sorts of things. So that we're sharing the world with that dimension, but we're in danger of destroying it. So if we destroy our world, if we if we had a nuclear war to destroy this planet, we wouldn't be just destroying this world, we'd be destroying higher dimensions and states beyond. The turbulence that this would create and the problems this would create are endless almost. So, it's that our irresponsible, stupid behavior has attracted beings from outside this dimension and from other worlds on this dimension who are concerned about what we're doing. And, who can justify any of it? But that's why I want to talk about this trap.
And if I may ask, and you're a writer, you call yourself a writer also, and I know you've written several books. In which of your books do you treat this subject, that if people want to read one of your books, which one should they read?
I've only got 2 books actually published.
Yeah.
The one I've written a lot over the years, but not for publication. And it wasn't until I started publishing in Hermes Risen that some of my words have found an outlet. Some years ago, I published a book called Consciousness in a Virtual Reality. Even I forget the title. For Consciousness in a Virtual Reality Holographic Universe. That really gives the background to these ideas. It's on Kindle. A friend of mine published it with me, and he's now preparing it to come out as a paperback. So that will be eventually available on Amazon, but it's already available on Amazon on Kindle. I don't think it costs much, about $5, something like that.
Okay, we will put a link in the description for those who would like to purchase it or read a sample and see if they like it. Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know.
That's one. The other book is a fiction book called Missing Time. And Missing Time is a story where all this kind of subject that I'm talking about is illustrated in the events and situations that the characters meet. And I did this in a way to make it more accessible, and hopefully more enjoyable than reading a straight treatise on a subject. So
Okay.
it's a story meant to illuminate, but without being too obvious about it.
Okay, we'll put this all the links in the description later on, so have a look in the description. Okay, so is it possible, the title of today's discussion is the Analog Superconscious Mind. How much do you think it's possible to connect to this analog superconscious mind while we are in a body here, while we're in this game?
Well, it's not that difficult. I do it every day, but it didn't happen until a certain stage in my life. And I think the reason for that was partly I think I was born with the intention of doing this, so what we tend to do is we have certain knowledge in our unconscious state, in our higher mind, in the unconscious mind. It's there. What we do is we reveal it to ourselves through our lives, what we already know, as you suggested, by planting situations and events in the story that we're living through that are going to bring these things out. So, I had psychic experiences, and I tried to develop as a medium with mixed success. Sometimes it worked very well, and other times it didn't work at all. which is no good when you're trying to, if you're asked to give messages to people and for some nothing comes through, it gets a bit embarrassing. But the point was, the training was involved me emptying my mind and allowing whatever it was I needed to know for somebody to come through. Well, what happened was, in 1992, a situation put me into a state where I started doing that same thing in order to understand consciousness and the universe. I didn't know that that's what I was doing at the time, but I did sort of know. And it was because I read a book called, it was called about the digital information universe. Professor Tom Stonier from Newcastle University, don't think he's with us now, and he's written on that subject. What I did was realized that we're living in a universe made entirely of information, which is, that's why it's a virtual reality. But I realized that information only has meaning in the context of systems. And I thought, well, I need to understand what role of systems. And I really, because of the background I had, very limited background in computing, I'd learned something called entity modeling. An entity model is something that you create when you go into a business and you look at all the work they do, the functions they perform, the inputs, the outputs, processes, and you create something called a data entity model, which is basically the top-down structure. So the top-down structure of an organization might be its chief executive officer and the board of directors. Then under that you get managers, and you get and if you're selling things, you have entities called customer, product, details of the customer, details of the product, and so on. And at the bottom of the tree, you get information relating to the manufacture of whatever it is you're selling, the organization of warehouses. So it takes all these different levels and layers into consideration. And I realized that's how the universe works. So every entity that exists, whether it's in thought or in physicality, has a point of light in the shadow, or a point of shadow in the light. Both, the one is just the reflection of the other. There is a point that represents the entire universe. Then there are points that represent, say, the black holes that create the galaxies. And the galaxies, a point for the galaxy, a point for each star, a point for each planet around each star, point for each particle of matter. And then underneath all of this, there is a point from which it's all constructed, points of light on the quantum digital dimension. And guess what the point of light on that dimension is? It's the one at the top. So the highest point and the lowest point are the same. So the one unit creates everything. The one unit experiences everything. It sounds familiar. So it was the entity model. So that means that in terms of data flow, the galaxy creates the star, it provides information that drives the sun, creates it moment to moment in time. The sun creates provides the quantum digital information that forms the planets, and the planet Earth provides the information that forms us and all life upon it. So if the idea that the Earth is a rock and that we are just happen to be here on it and we're not connected to it is total nonsense, because in the simulation of the game, we are integral to the planet, the world, and the entire universe. but then there isn't an entire universe. It's a virtual reality that we our infinite selves create, but it's nothing like it seems to be. That's the main thing. Anyway, that's, so I've forgotten where I am. Does that answer what you said?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you for going into this. So I asked about the analog superconscious mind,
Yes,
how we can
right.
live it in, if
Okay.
it's
Yes,
possible
sorry.
to live it in
Yes.
this world. And
Yes.
I was thinking maybe for people who might not be familiar with these concepts so much, maybe we can juxtapose a bit the differences between the analog and the
Yes.
digital, how you
Right.
understand it. You use the terms in a specific way, so maybe
Yes.
to go into that a bit.
Well, yeah. I when I realized that there were these two states of consciousness, that we once had a mind that functioned in the analog state. I say analog, analog means waves. And so if you take a CD and you play a CD, there's a little laser that scans points of light, a silvered mirror surface on a CD. That's digital. And what it does is it converts the digital signal into waves of sound that you can then play through your loudspeaker. So that's the analogy, that you've got all waves can be converted into digital information and then resurrected from the digital information. And science talks about a wave function, a probability distribution that tells us where a particle might be. Well, in fact, it's more direct than that. The wave function tells the particle, creates the particle where it needs to be. So we have on the analog dimension, we have a wave body, a fractal body, that puts our matter, our atoms and our cells into space time to create us while we're here. Now, that we had a mind on that dimension that was much more spiritual than the one we've got now, because we had the two forms of consciousness. That's where we had the subjective meaning, the numerological consciousness. In the physical, we had a relatively primitive brain that allowed our bodies to function here, so that if the higher analog being decided to leave it for a while, I think that the physical body was given some autonomy so it could survive. It could eat, feed, reproduce, function. Well, what happened when we lost the game player, or the game player became us here? It lost access to that higher mind, which knew who and what it was, and knew the consequences of its actions. And we entered a state where we don't understand who and what we are. We have no memory of what came before. And we think that when we die, we're dead, and that's the end of it. So we have a built-in fear factor. And the fear has created the game, because it's like we want to survive. We don't know that we can't die, and that it's impossible to kill us, really. Or the worst thing you give up is the avatar. Now, if we had a society that was balanced, where the consciousness had all these characteristics of the oneness, coupled with this lower consciousness, if you like, a functioning information processor, you would have a more balanced society. But with the divide, what's happened is we've gone into purely subjective object, from a subjective to objective mind. we only deal with information, and even worse, we can only exchange information with language. You see, before we would have been telepathic. We could have thought whole thoughts. We could have communicated whole thoughts. We could have passed information from one another, you know, as a packet of meaning, not words. But we've limited our consciousness now to the area of the brain that handles language. So it wasn't designed to be our primary thinking sort, you know, where we think everything. So if we had I've prepared a list of what the properties of an analog spiritual higher dimension would have, and a list of what the consciousness we've got. Because what happened was, when we gave up the higher consciousness, focused in the lower brain consciousness, it's nowhere near adequate for what we need to express ourselves as we really are. We can only express ourselves in this limited, restricted form, and the game, part of the consciousness, which is purely mathematical, is game theory, is an aspect of mathematics. So, you know, because we are mathematical in nature, we play games. We can't help it. It's just, it goes with the territory. And the things that we do are really to survive. So we have characteristics, like we try to classify everything. You know, we write lots and lots of books. We publish papers, peer review. We've got encyclopedias, and now we've got the internet, which stores information even faster. And now they're developing artificial intelligence systems that can take language and can create writing in any style, any format you want. And it's not real. Well, it's real in this. It's a set of words that you can read, and it might make sense. But to think that is consciousness is another part of the trap, because language, you see, telepathy is about exchanging meaning and feeling. We're not aware of what one another feels directly, only indirectly. We don't really know what one another thinks, because I say words that leave my mouth, go into your ears, and you assemble them according to your own understanding and experience. So you don't really know what I'm saying any more than I do, probably. But can you see that there's limitation? Now, the list of shall I read the list? Because I think that would help.
Sure. Yeah.
The motivation in a, let's say, the perfect analog digital state of consciousness would have what the motivating factor would be: to be or not to be. That is the question. But existence is the function of higher mind. Now, in the quantum digital dimension, what we are driven is to do. We want activity, to do things, to make things, to build things, to arrange things, and so on. All this revolves around action. Now, action is another name for karma. So we feel compelled to act, and every action we undertake has a consequence. Now, the thing is, the universe is a game machine designed to record the consequences of our actions, which is the one thing we don't know. You know, you have no idea what you're doing when you do anything, really. And so what happens is that a physical action leads to in the oneness to an experience that is meaningful but abstract in our terms, non-physical. So the universe is recording everything that we do and the experience of everything we do that other people would have. Do you see what I mean? So if you do something to somebody, now if you do good things and you're helpful, when you do your action replay in the great dimension beyond, when you're reviewing, you're having a debriefing on your time here and what you did, you can rerun the simulator. You can experience your actions from the perspective of other people. So if you do good things and help people, then you've got a relatively pleasurable experience to come. If you share love or feelings and everything, all of that is positive. But if those people who do negative things or inflict pain, they will experience all the pain they've inflicted as they would have experienced it. So it's a graphic experience, what you call visceral, really, that what we do, we experience. And so if we do things, the old saying is, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to yourself. Well, that's why, because what you do to others, you are doing to yourself. And then, beyond that, the consequences of what we do affect everything, because we are in a state of oneness. So everything we do affects everything else. Nothing happens in isolation or separation. And the game machine that we're in it just records everything, and it doesn't judge. It doesn't say, you do a good thing or a bad thing. It's not looking at your motives. It's not looking at why you did it. The universe, the game machine simply records the fact of an action, the karma, and it works out what you might need to do to compensate. So if you've done good for people, you come back, you may have good done to you, or you opportunity to do more good. People who do harm, it gives them they will come back to experience what they've created for others themselves, but not as punishment. None of this is reward and punishment. It's simply enlightenment, learning, education. So I said, it's a teaching machine as well as a game machine. Now, if we had a much higher, we all work on both dimensions. When we do meditation, or people that are involved in spiritual activities and practices, they are to awaken our analog side, our analog being. We are that being now. We've just forgotten it. And if we were still in that state, the society that we live in would be totally different. Now, I've produced two lists of the characteristics of a purely spiritual analog world and a purely digital objective world, bearing in mind that these are the extremes, that we're actually in the middle somewhere, and some people are more advanced spiritually than others, and some people are totally devoid of any qualities like that. And now shall I read them out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, read them out. Why not?
Right. So I'll run through the list of the digital game, and let's see if this rings any bells with you. Everything is value based. We have very limited psychic ability, but many have some. We're individualistic. We're ego driven. The society is divisive. We look at what makes what people's differences rather than similarities. Are we becoming far more superficial? If you put on the television almost any time of day now, it seems, you know, it's all reality TV or games or dramas, soap operas. It's all superficial, and it's all designed to keep our minds from thinking serious thoughts or looking at who and what we really are. It's controlling and authoritarian. Because I told you about the hierarchy, the data hierarchy that drives this quantum universe. Hierarchy is a natural thing for us. So we admire people of status, people of wealth, people of beauty, all these things. We fear, you know, we have someone to rule over us, as if we need it. And everything is competitive, and winning the game is most important. So cheating is quite acceptable. I mean, governments are quite happy to lie. You know, they see no contradiction in that. And if they're found out, well, you know, they might resign, but they might not. Everything is polarized between wealth and poverty, because it's poverty that creates wealth. You couldn't have wealth if there wasn't poverty. We live in a war economy. You know, we got a war going on now, and it's really to sell arms and exercise political control and other outcomes. We emphasize the differences between people. Oh, look, they wear funny clothes, or they pray kneeling down or standing up or on their heads, whatever it is. We don't like it if it's different. We're driven by dogma. Well, I don't need to explain that. We have gender inequality. We have emotions that are chaotic, unstable, and engrossing. So, you know, we're driven by emotion. We have a very great dependence, put a lot of effort into belief systems, as though having a particular belief is somehow going to make the difference between life after death and not life after death. That if you've got the right beliefs in your head, someone's going to open the door of the pearly gates and let you in. And if you haven't got the right belief, the door stays shut. You know, it's all nonsense. We have a lot of crime. We have punishment. Well, punishment, of course, is nonsense, because it's just another set of karma to sort out. We're possessive about things and people. We're motivated by fashion, and so on. I could go on, but that we get the idea of what this kind of society is all about. Now, if we were in a purely analog state, by the analog dimension is sometimes called the fifth dimension as well. It's, you know, or the etheric. It's got different names. Now, we would be, it's based on feeling and meaning. And we would be intuitive, psychic, telepathic. It would be about collective life, collective decisions, the benefit for the community. The individual would be working towards benefiting the community. Instead of an ego, we'd have a sense of presence. And societies, groups would be inclusive. They wouldn't want to keep people out because they got the wrong shoes or the wrong trainers or something. Instead of being superficial, artistic activity would be deep. It would be liberating and cooperative. There'd be honesty. We'd be resource-based, but environmentally aware. wouldn't, we would take what we need, not what we want. There would be peaceful organization of society and so on. There'd be balance in gender and race and so on, because in the end, gender and race are not significant factors, because we are consciousness. Consciousness has no defining physical features. Anyway, I think that gives the general thrust. And some of the I'm thinking now when the British went out to, say, Australia, and the people there were all living happily on the coast, enjoying the better environment. So what the British took the coast, all the coastal regions, and drove them inland. Said, oh yes, they live in the outback. Well, they didn't originally, but they might have done, but they probably lived everywhere. But what I mean is, we tend to take people's land. Now, the things though, whenever we've gone into some indigenous culture, we've seen them as primitive. And we've seen the Europeans have always seen themselves as superior. And well, because the result has been, we know what the result has been, and but it's nonsense, because a culture doesn't need to be technically advanced or have political savvy to be spiritually advanced. And it quite often these cultures lived closer to nature. They had a more fair society. They often didn't have money. They traded. It's a whole different way of life. But we saw ourselves, those who went there, as superior because of our technology or whatever, because it's probably the opposite that's true. And so somewhere along the line, we are going to go back to that in-between state where we must get over this concept of money. I don't mean that money doesn't have its uses, but it shouldn't be the main driving force behind everything that we do. It should be a means of exchanging something, information, energy, or whatever, but not something that is a commodity in its own right. Because I think it was the Bible, was it? Didn't like the idea of people lending money for interest. Well, we've seen the result, haven't we? We know once money's a commodity, there are those who want to accumulate it at all costs to other people. And that's why we're in such a state. And so I can see it going a couple of ways. Either we've got to make the effort to reach out to the higher dimension and bring the light forward through our own efforts in our own hearts, in our own way, or something dramatic is coming, because the planet itself is a living being and the planet is evolving, and the planet will want, if we want to go with it, we've got to evolve as well. We can't go on treating it the way we're treating it. So something's either going to happen to put things right from the planet's point of view, which isn't necessarily good news for us, or it could be that the light is going to come forwards and transform us, to bring us forward into a higher state of evolution, whether we want it or not. And it's going to be much harder for people who live entirely materialistic lives to cope with. I think that I can't say what's going to happen, but I think that what will happen is somewhere in between those two. That somewhere we must make an effort because if we don't, the effort will be made for us, and it might not be what we want.
Okay.
A lot of thoughts.
Yes, a lot of thoughts. I was also thinking when you read out those lists, another pair would be to be and to have, you know.
Yes, yes.
You said to be and to do, but I thought of having, like with the money, associated with the money. We think we're having something, but what we have is just temporary anyway, you know.
Well, yes, that's what I mean by value-based. It's numerical rather than numerological, I think, is the way I would see it.
Yes, and then the other thing that came to mind was what they call phenomenology, the difference between the phenomenon, which is the visible thing, and then the noumenon, like the essence behind it, in a way. And we are both in a way, or we experience being both at the same time,
Yes,
being in a
yes.
body, but having possible access to this analog superconscious mind if we want to, and if we want to develop it, as you said, through meditation, for example, is one way of doing it. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I realized is that if we were born as our analog counterparts, because they are outside time, and they wouldn't have aged the way we age. They would have lived healthily for much longer, and they would have withdrawn from the body when they finished with it. They wouldn't have, you see, but by becoming the body, by fully embedding our consciousness on this dimension, we can't choose to withdraw. Very few. Some people can, I know, but generally we can't. We have to wait for a process of termination, death. So we created death, but also, you see, we wouldn't have been born with no knowledge of who and what we are in our past. We would have been more or less mature from being an embryo. The maturity would have come forward very quickly. We wouldn't have had a childhood phase of existence. So, people with and there is a singer called Angelina Jordan, and she won Norway's Got Talent at 7 years old because she could sing Billie Holiday song with all the feeling and emphasis of well, people say, how could she have that? Oh, I put a spell on you, which she did when she was 9. I think people should look that up, because to see a 9-year-old singing a song like that with all the inflection of an adult, but if you watch her perform, you can see it's the higher conscious mind. She's got a direct link with this analog mind, and when she performs, either her higher self or another entity who is working through her, she sings like somebody of a 50-year-old, really. She's now about 15, 16. She's more or less an adult. I don't know whether that's still the same or what's happened with her, because teenage years are not always the easiest thing to go through. But at that age, when she was young, you could see the maturity came on for the performance, and then right at the moment she stopped singing, she's a little girl again. You could see it. You could see her become, the child again. And people, a lot of people ask, how is it possible that a girl of that age can put all that? It isn't emotion, because it would be feeling. She'd be very advanced in the heart center, and that's where, because obviously a child can't understand the emotions of an adult. But the feeling, a higher consciousness, which is, it exists in a state where feeling is the norm, they could come through. So, that's a very interesting situation, how that can happen. And I mean, there've been lots of examples. I'm sure that Mozart, and his sister, where they were brilliant, weren't they? Musicians at a very early age. I'm sure that there was some process where a higher mind, the analog mind, was working right from the start. So that this sense of maturity it goes with it.
I'm just wondering, when someone links to the analog superconscious mind, because how can I say, where all is one, there is no time and there are no experiences, no maturity, because anything time-wise is irrelevant. So I'm just wondering, when someone links through this superconscious analog mind, through that mind, they can link to all that is. So they can link to an existence of a 50-year-old who has lived, because if Angelina Jordan only links to the analog mind, where all is in the now, is that enough? Or does she not have to link to something specific, where someone has sung a song like "I Put a Spell on You," who, to link to the specific emotion or feeling, so that she can then convey it, even though she's a child now in this body. You try. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I know you're trying to explain it in a a logical, reasonable way. I don't think it is a spontaneous thing. When you see her, if you see her in Norway's Got Talent, at 7, she give her a set of words. I don't know how many times she has to hear a song, but she doesn't. She arranges it. She doesn't have to be told what to do. You see her when she did "I Put a Spell on You." It's a black and white film, and there are these musicians, and they're from the Norwegian army. They're backing her because she's become a figure in Norway at that time, and she's ordering them about. She knows what she wants. There's no question of them telling her what to do. She's in total control while she's working. And then, after that, you see this video. I've seen a few where she'll run to her mother for a hug, or she'll grab a toy or something, something childish. When she's back, it's a instant change. It's not. I don't believe that from that age. I mean, she apparently was showing signs of being musical from about 1 or 2 or some silly age. I don't think that sort of maturity can be explained in our conventional terms, if you see what I mean.
I'm just mean, she puts herself, not consciously, maybe she's a child, into this state of mind, the analog mind. And while being in that state, she can connect to anything, basically.
I don't think she puts herself.
No.
I think it happens to her. I don't think so. I mean, I've had the experience myself of I try to reach. When I started, I would try to reach out to this higher mind for knowledge, but in the end, I didn't have to. And it comes to me when I least want it. Sometimes, 4 a.m, I'm writing these articles for Hermes Risen magazine, for the European Theosophical Society. While I'm working on a paper, I might sort of get woken up at 3 or 4 a.m. with a complete insight into something, and I have to get up, put on the computer and start writing, because it's most inconvenient at times. It's not something. It's something that comes through you. It doesn't. You don't necessarily instigate it or control it. It's the other way around, really.
It depends who you say you is.
Yes.
Because at the beginning you explained that we are in a video game, and
Yes.
we're just this is the avatar. So maybe it is you, the one holding the the console, sitting on the proverbial couch, and we are playing the avatar. And they say, okay, wake him up now. I wake him up now, my avatar called Terry. So he gets an insight. I give him an insight now so he can write another article. And, maybe this happens to Angelina as well, that the one behind the scene who's playing this avatar, Angelina, helps her to do that. I'm just wondering if we go with this analogy,
Well, you can find all sorts of. I don't know the truth of it because I'm not her. I don't know what happens. I've seen the videos. You can see how in control and in command she is at a ridiculously young age. Now, what starts the process off, I don't know, but when you're performing on television or in a theatre or in a public park or whatever, you've got time. You've got to fit in with the situation. You can't wait for the inspiration to come through. Do you see what I mean? I think it's all part and parcel of the process. I mean, in a sense, this is the same as the story of Jesus is, from my point of view, I could interpret it very much in the same way, that the higher consciousness came through to address multitudes or to do work to help people do things, and then it left for the person to have to deal with whatever in daily life. It's like the Father in heaven and the Son of Man would be, the Father would be the analog being, and the Son would be the Son of Man, means the physical being born in a physical dimension. But this has been interpreted as God the Creator. I don't think it was God the Creator. It was a higher being on the analog dimension working through. And I mean, I had experience of working with this medium. I think I mentioned it before, who would go into a totally unconscious state when the spirits and guides and whoever came through. He wasn't there. He was totally gone.
Trance channeling, I think they call that trance channeling. When
yes, but there's degrees of trance. Some people can channel. I don't the word channel. I'm older than that, but a lot of it is coming through your mind and you're putting it out. He would literally die. He would leave the body. And he wouldn't be there. And
exactly.
And the entities who came through had to control the body. And then one of the things they used to do at the end of it, he would lose a lot of fluid in the process, and I would have to have a glass of water. I'd hold. We are look. I could hold the water. The hands would come up. I place them in, and I can't do it. I swallow. What would happen was the hands would pour the water down the throat. The throat would be open. The water would get poured down it. And you can't do that. That happened because it wasn't him controlling the body. It was somebody else who could do that. And on one occasion, the spirit came through so rousing, so fired up, that the body was thrown out of the chair onto the floor, and the tape recorder blew up that we were using. He was literally like a dead body, and somehow or other we had to get him back in his chair. It was very uncomfortable. That entity was banned from coming through after that. But that gave me some insight into this separation between the higher and lower consciousness. Now that is the situation that is not natural. We should be one whole being, the part of us outside of time and the part of us inside of time. But be on time. Now, you see, time is the measure of passing moments, of sequence here, isn't it? In the spirit dimension, there is no time, but there is sequence. And that sequence, you can say, well, what marks, what's changing through time in the state of consciousness? Because something must be changing, because all these events are happening on all these dimensions, in all these states. So what is it that, if there isn't time that's changing, what is changing? And the answer, from my point of view, is complexity, you see, because all thoughts, now, they're basically made up from the properties of numbers, and particularly the prime numbers. So trying to translate that idea into physical reality, you see, but if you remember that there are infinite numbers, and if you stack them up in a line, like in the Riemann paradox hypothesis, if you've got all of the prime numbers in a vertical line, and the higher you go, the numbers that are beyond imagination from our point of view, what do they mean? I mean, oneness, two-ness, three-ness, four-ness is simple. You can. It's not. You don't need to be a genius to see that three-ness comes from three people having a conversation. Two-ness from two people. But when you're dealing with numbers that are moving towards infinity, from our point of view, what on earth could they possibly mean? And how can the meaning of number, the values and the meanings of numbers, assemble into this environment that we're in our complex forms? There's no easy way of understanding the reality and how such simple ideas can form such complex patterns. But be aware that there is a complex thought, in universal terms, could be I must get up and go out and go to the shops, because look what's involved there. There's the concept of going out, which is moving in through space from one building to the street, getting in a car, going to the supermarket. There's the super. All that is a structure within consciousness. It's all just thoughts. The whole world, the universe, is just a thought, but it's a very complicated thought, underneath all of this, there is a network or a matrix of lines of light joining points of entities. So, we're entities, you're an entity, I'm an entity. On the inside of us, we've got a very complex pattern of cells and atoms and organs and all of that. But we, as points, there is a point where you are an individual and that you are just one. It don't matter how important a person is, they don't add up to more than one. You see, but you are one of a subset of many systems. You belong to a country. You belong to a race. You belong to a tax system. You may belong to a library or a network, and all all of this is totally interconnected by lines of light, connecting points. And in an increasing, every day we go to bed and we wake up in the morning, and this world that we're in has become more complex. And this is one of the problems. It's the complexity of our existence is spiraling out of control, and we're creating totally unnecessarily systems of work that we can't cope with. We can't do things. You know, it's like if people are supposed to repair engineering systems, you know, life support or heating or anything. And there's a lot of complexity. The job to do that becomes more complex over time. And the pressures from management to do the minimum possible work in the minimum amount of time to save the maximum amount of money can lead to fatalities and accidents or more problems down the line. Galloping complexity is what we're suffering from. Our lives in the quantum digital dimension have become more complex than we can cope with or handle. And we need to get back to a simple way of life where the analog dimension, just to be, to exist, to be aware of the presence of spirit within you. You know, you are the presence. Getting back to that. But then everything in the complexity of existence is on some level an interconnected entity model, a data model with information and meaning whizzing about. And the complexity, complexity is a branch of mathematics. It relates to chaos. Chaos and complexity are kind of, you know, two prongs of the same process. And the way things work, complexity is how simple things become massively complex patterns, and emergence is the way new things come out of nothing almost when the situation for their conception is right. You know, that's how a child comes into being. The situation's right, and they emerge into form in a body. So that's the real time. I wonder if anyone will understand this. I don't know. I've got to go on, don't I? I don't know whether people will appreciate this or not, but
there's a lot to digest, I think. Yeah, and there were, you know, maybe points that are their own topic, maybe, or they could be treated as their own topic in the future, you know, and or we could
yes.
go into it again, you know. So yes, I think we've come to the end of today's session. But do you have any final words you would like to give just for today's topic? Just anything you would like to say before we come to a close?
Yes. Almost every day we're being bombarded with news of control, surveillance, conspiracies, people doing bad things, people wanting to limit our lives, control our lives, put digital chips in us, and there's lots going on that we're with authority that is the poverty. I feel very badly that there are a lot of families now in England, for example, who are going beyond the poverty line, are in danger of losing their homes. It's like, you know, energy. We're paying enormous amount of of money, and we accept we've got to pay more for electricity and gas, as though I believe there are alternative sources out there that are being suppressed because it's inconvenient. They don't want to lose their income. So what I'm trying to say is all of the people are doing things for companies and for organizations that are harming other people. The organizations that do this don't carry the karma. It's the people who do the jobs for them that carry the karma. So we're doing this knowingly to ourselves, because we're trapped in a system that compels us to do it. And in the end, we are spiritual, enlightened beings waiting to reveal ourselves to ourselves in a way. And there are no really seriously bad people, but it's our ignorance, our lack of understanding, and the state of consciousness that we're in that's responsible for all of this. And it's not our fault. It's the game system that we're in is simply doing what it was programmed to do in the first place, which is kind of oppose everything that we try to do in order to wake us up. Now, it's only going to get worse. It would be better if we did choose to wake up. We can choose to wake up. We can decide to work together as one. We can try to do the right thing in all situations, and collectively we can find a way out of this mess if there is a will to do it. But it's the forces that control us that are really imaginary. They don't exist, but we've given into them. And it doesn't have to be like this. Life could be much better. We could make it so, number one.
So let's choose to wake up then, everyone. And thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you like what we're doing. Like us, comment, or share our content. That would be great. So we hope to see you soon with the next broadcast and the next video. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.